So what we do is, if you look at the total amount of spending that's going on in the federal government and break it down by Social Security and Medicare and defense spending, interest on the debt, and what you find is we can shut down the entirety of government with the exception of Medicare, Social Security, and paying interest on the debt. And we still don't come close to balancing the budget. Well, close. We're still $230 billion away from balancing the budget. So the moral of the story here is we're wasting time when we talk about little things like, cutting the mission to Mars or cutting community block grants for $300 million. If we're not talking about cuts to the budget that are in the $1 trillion range, then we're just wasting our time.
If you're talking about trillions, that's real money. So right. How do you do that politically?
Well, that's the hard part. We've reached a point now where we have two conflicting things coming together. On the one hand, politically, it is incredibly hard to talk about cuts of $1 trillion, in large part because the only thing that's of that magnitude is Social Security and Medicare. The other problem is we're reaching a point where mathematically it's just impossible to pay our bills. So one of two things is going to happen. Either we're going to have a leader come along and kick politics in the teeth and say we're going to fix this problem, or the laws of mathematics are going to do it for us.
So you think that's really not a choice? Eventually, it's going to have to be done.
Oh, right, yeah.
Because financially, the numbers are just unsustainable.
Right. The only choice in front of us is either we drastically cut back the federal government under our own control, or the laws of mathematics do it for us. But either way, the federal government in the next decade or two is going to be a heck of a lot smaller than it is now.
But there are going to be people who say we're a country, we're a rich country, we should be able to take care of the neediest. There's got to be a way to make this thing work. If we're willing to spend money on defense and the rest of these things, we should be able to take care of the neediest people in our society.
Yeah, it's good to say that we should take care of the neediest. And what comes to mind when we say that, and Americans do this because Americans are generally a very giving and caring people. And what comes to mind when we talk about the neediest are the homeless and the young children who don't have any food. And there's no question that we should take care of these people. And when I say that, I mean we individually should take care of these people. But when you look at Social Security and Medicare as it exists today, a vast, vast portion of that spending is not dealing with people like that.
You also talked about how the stimulus didn't work, and you had a number of charts that showed that it seems that there isn't much, if any, correlation between government spending and a stimulus. You could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, if we look going back to the 1950s, look at every instance where there's been an increase in federal spending, and then ask the question, what happened to the economy after that increase in federal spending? And pretty much no matter which way you cut the data, you don't see what we hope to see, which is increase in federal spending goes along with increased economic activity. We see either no effect at all, or depending on how you look at it, you sometimes see a negative effect. That is, more government spending is associated with a contraction of GDP. What that suggests is, at best, our $3 trillion stimulus package was wasted money. At worst, it actually made the situation worse than it would have been otherwise.
But then the Paul Krugmans of this world are going to say the stimulus wasn't big enough.
Well, Krugman's going to say that, and my challenge is, show me evidence. All the evidence that I see, it's available to everyone, is that stimulus historically doesn't have any effect.
And also in a larger sense, I mean, the numbers you have, I assume they're true, they're based in fact. Then why are there so many economists who approved of things like the stimulus, who think that there should be an active role for government?
Right, that's a good question. Now first off, I'll just say in passing, the numbers that I have come from the federal government. Mm-hmm. So
right.
If there's something wrong with them, it's the same person I'm saying is the problem, is giving us bad data. But the question is, why aren't economists coming out against this? A tremendous number of economists came out against the stimulus package. The problem is what you see on the evening news are, firstly, the people who work for the federal government. And if you work for the federal government, you're not going to say that stimulus spending is bad, because if you do, you won't be working for the federal government. Mm-hmm. So there's an observation problem there. There's also the problem of there's a huge number of economists who believe that the stimulus package was a bad idea. And we publish individually. We publish in the Wall Street Journal en masse. We all signed a letter, but we don't have at an individual basis. These are grassroots economists. We can't call up Fox News like Krugman can and get on there. So
I don't think he'd want to be on Fox.
Or right. Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, but So it's a problem of the perception of what economists believe is being driven by one or two very loud economists. And there are thousands of economists on the other side that don't agree with what's going on.
So some of the things that you show on the chart are kind of doom and gloom. I mean, the numbers are literally off the chart.
Right.
So what can be done? Can anything be done?
Yeah, and that's a good question, because fundamentally, America, and I don't mean the federal government, I mean America, the people, the companies, we are a productive society. We can come out of this, but we have to be allowed to do what we do best, and that is create jobs, create wealth, figure out how to come up with new products. Every time the federal government imposes a regulation, imposes a tax, it prevents us from doing what we need to do to pull us out of this. So the number one step in the right direction is to stop this nonsense about the government creates jobs and recognize that it's Americans, it's people who create jobs. Leave us alone and let us do what we do.
Isn't a lot of this demographics, though? I mean, you've got this gigantic section of the population, baby boomers, and until they all die off, we're going to be in tough economic times. I mean, maybe the model itself isn't wrong. It's just that this outlier of chunk of people that were born between 1945 and 1965, they're screwing everything up.
Well, yeah, and I wouldn't put the blame on the baby boomers. These are people who brought us through the 1950s and 1960s and great economic growth in this country. So I wouldn't pound on them too hard. Now, it is the case that we've got a large number of baby boomers who are going to be draining Social Security, they're going to be draining Medicare, but the problem there isn't the boomers. It's the fundamental inefficiency of Social Security and Medicare. Those two systems shouldn't exist.
So what should we do to take care of people over the elderly?
Well, I think the first thing to ask is, what can people do to take care of themselves? So if we didn't have a Social Security system, we would do what we were doing in this country from the 1700s up to the 1930s, which was you save for your own retirement.
But there's always going to be some people who aren't.
Sure. Yeah.
So what do you do with them? You let them die on the street?
No, not at all. Prior to our welfare state, we had what were called mutual aid societies, and you see the remnants of them today. The Elks Social Club. These things are what were mutual aid societies. And the idea of a mutual aid society, it's a group of people who voluntarily come together and say, look, people shouldn't be dying out on the street. They shouldn't be hungry. So what we're all going to do is, those of us who have jobs, we're going to put some money into the till. And the money is going to be used for our members who are, left homeless, or they're left jobless, or what have you. And so the people take care of the people.
Rather than the government.
Right.
Is that politically palatable?
I don't know if it's politically palatable, but it's certainly morally palatable. We're called to care for each other, and we have this innate tendency. It doesn't matter what your religion is, or if you're no religion at all. We have this drive to care for the poor and the needy. When the government steps in and does that, we aren't caring for the poor. What we're doing is sloughing the poor off on somebody else, i.e. the government, to take care of. The great power in building community lies when we come together and solve problems ourselves, not when somebody else comes and whitewashes the thing for us.
But some people might say, but I want a government that is required to take care of these things. I don't want to have these things dependent upon the tender mercies of individuals.
Yeah, and first off, the government's not good at doing this. The government is an entity of force. The purpose of the government is to force us to do things we wouldn't do voluntarily. And the fact is, we want to take care of the poor. We all feel this concern. Now, you can raise the question, well, what happens if we allow people to care for the poor instead of the government, and nobody cares for the poor? We all let them die. Well, you've described a contradiction, because on the one hand, you're saying people left to their own would not care for the poor, but you're also saying that they would vote for a government that would force them to care for the poor.
And the government is the people.
And the government is the people, right. So it's this, what I call the schizophrenic voter, that you're a saint in the voting booth and you're a sinner in the marketplace.
All right. Antony Davies, thank you very much.
My pleasure, thank you.